Hi guys, welcome to another question and answer video. Today I'm going to answer to a question about the rotating wrist motion, which I saw it's kind of like some people are confused on this motion. I'll try to explain how I perceive it and kind of like developed it. So hopefully it will help whoever wants to develop this motion, and who doesn't know it existed or never considered can maybe see some benefits and understand why it would like to develop this motion. So basically I will start on how I divide the arm motion, the wrist motion, the fingers motion in both the German and French grip, and this is essential to then get to the point of the rotating motion. So basically in a German grip, so having the thumb looking sideways and the top of the hand facing up. For an arm motion, I see this as the arm motion, so the free stroke basically, that involves the forearm. It kind of involves the bigger muscles. Then I shift the wrist motion, of course, in this way, which is a pretty straightforward motion. And then the finger motions, which is kind of these things. I don't personally apply this to my drumming, but some people use it for like blast beats or intense drumming parts. And the same thing I kind of do in the French grip. So basically just shifting, so nothing changes in how I hold the stick. I just put the thumbs looking upward. This would be the arm motion, free stroke. Again, I divide this for part of the body or muscle groups just because it makes more sense. It keeps all the motions connected as concepts, and one motion might give me the answer for another one, especially when I was developing all these motions and techniques. And then the second step would be this rotating motion. The German grip develops like in this way, and it makes sense. In the French grip, so with the thumb facing up, it's kind of hard. We don't have a lot of possibility of moving the wrist here, so it makes more sense to, keeping the thumb looking upward, have this rotating motion. So it's like the pivot point is the thumb, and then the hand moves underneath. And then I'll explain exactly like the benefit and how I developed this in a second. And then so I would go arm motion, wrist motion for the French grip. Basically that's what I think it is. It's the wrist motion for the French grip. And then finger motion. Okay, so typical French grip finger position. So in this way I kind of like have all my sections for the German grip and sections for the French grip. Arm motion, it's pretty similar. Finger motion, it's pretty similar. The big difference stands in the wrist motion. Okay, so what's the benefit of the rotating wrist motion? It's that in the German grip we have to think of the motion forces us to kind of like lift the weight of the bones of our hand. Basically that's what we're doing, right? So we have to kind of think that when we start playing very fast, all these little things about like the weight of the bones and how the dynamic of the motion that we're doing, they all get in a way. It becomes like what blocks basically us from being relaxed and being comfortable in doing certain motions at an intense speed or intense dynamics. So the benefit in the rotating motion is that we don't lift any bones because it's rotating on its own. So you can literally feel this, like if you do this and you do this, you feel this is effortless in regard of lifting, right? You can feel it in this muscle here because this is the muscle that it's controlling all this part of the hand, right? So you can see how this keeps the muscle relaxed and this instead activates the muscle a little bit more. So this is the benefit. But what's the bad part of this motion? It's that it's a very wide motion. It's the German grip can be very straightforward, very small dynamic and small kind of like range of motion to achieve a good speed and still a good volume. Instead, this one, there's no way for us to have like a short range of motion. It has to have kind of like a wide course of motion. So it kind of like, it benefits for, because we do not lift the weight of the bones, but we have to still have kind of like a big range of motion. So in my opinion, what the benefit here is that compared to like at the same speed of the German grip, this allows you to stay more relaxed and have more power. I don't feel a lot of effort even if I'm like really pushing a lot now. Still pretty relaxed, no particular tension. Instead here, I would start feeling like there's a lot of impact. Also like the landing way, how the stick lands in the German grip, it's kind of like all in this part of the hand. Instead here, the stick is more in our hand, as we can see, as it lands in this way. It's kind of more in the hand, so we don't have to kind of make a lot of pressure with the finger to control the impact. So there are these two benefits, but then so it's kind of like okay for those things in my opinion. Then everybody can kind of develop this in different ways also, because if you start doing this and also add the fingers, a little bit of finger motion, you really can speed it up. And you know, mixing wrist and fingers always allow you to speed up and still have a good volume. So now that we understood the pros and cons of this motion, how do we develop this? So a good way for me to always understand the techniques and motions is to do the motions without the stick in my hands, because it's always a very good answer to all my questions. How should the thumb be? How should the index finger be? Where is my pinky? How the elbow? Where's the rotator? Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so all that stuff I figure out just by doing the motions without the stick. Then I understand that the pivot point, it's kind of like the thumb, as I was saying before. So I literally like try to figure out, because I want to develop the feeling, because the feeling is what really then allows me to scale the speed and the dynamic of what I'm doing, rather than knowing the position, knowing where is the thumb, where things should be. The feel, it's like if it feels good and it sounds good, it's working. And then I look at it and eventually it looks good, because usually that's what happens, is it feels good and sounds good, then it looks good because it's doing the right thing. So but anyway, so I try this in this way, and then I try to recreate the same situation with the stick. At first it will kind of like, the stick will go all over the place. At least this is what used to happen to me. It was like, it was very hard to coordinate the motion and have the stick going in a specific and a precise spot. So I kind of like created the course. I back engineered the course of the stick. So I started from the landing position, and then I would just let the wrist do what it would had to do. So I would start with this like a slow motion approach to understand the path of the stick. And here, for example, I start to feel the two ways of the stick. The stick, so the back part that pushes up when I go this way, and then the tip of the stick when the weight of the tip of the stick when I go down, that the weight kind of shifts to the tip of the stick. So, and of course we will never go all the way, like this has a weird approach, but this is just for us to understand, exaggerate and understand what is happening, and develop, you know, the feeling with the stick, how the stick is working compared to our hand, so that then we can adjust this as let's say the strokes go faster and the more motion and the dynamics get smaller, everything happens more here. There is a little like kind of like slightly rounded motion of the stick, but it's not so exaggerated as I'm doing it here. But this is my first approach, so starting from here, going back, and then I start to speed up the motion speed, and still letting some space from one stroke to the other. This is the other way of playing and practicing slow, which is a fast motion, leaving space between the strokes. This is a very useful thing because here the brain has all the time to think of what's happening, but this is not then what the real experience that we will have of this motion. This, it's closer to the real experience. It's not so intense. The brain, it's not overworking itself, but it's kind of like the stroke happens and then the message arrives to the brain, and the brain kind of try to understand what's going on and slowly figures out. So this is another step that it was always very useful for me. And then I start to kind of make this motion more fluid and normal, and I start to relax everything. And from here I start to analyze all the parts of my hand. So here is where the details comes in. This I'm doing this in like 30 seconds now. This might take days before you actually start to get to this point of having like the strokes happening. Maybe not. Maybe it takes 1 minute, but if it doesn't, it's not an issue. Like the normal progress from 0 to starting, it's that it will take some days or some time at least, and then slowly, starting to understand how like the thumb position is, and then like the rest of the hand, and how the like wrist rotation, and then I go back and repeat, without the stick, with the stick, and try to understand how the stick modifies my body motions, and that. But basically the main part is from here to understand what's the stick path, and then how is my hand working, and try to make the two things work together, so staying synchronized, especially when I start to go like in a fluent motion. And then just keep practicing, keep doing it, and just keep in mind that the thumb should point upward. And then the more, of course, you speed this motion up, the more it's like all in the wrist and the hand, and not so much in like lifting the stick so much and having all this rotation going. It's way more straightforward, but to have this kind of spontaneous motion, you have to really go in the details. If not, it's not going to be a precise muscular memory, and it's always going to be kind of like random, a little bit vertical, a little bit not. You have to kind of like teach to your body what is the path and how is the entire motion, and then you repeat it and make it like it has to be perfect first, and then with repetition you speed it up, and so on. If it's not perfect, then all the mistakes will start to show up and will become bigger and bigger as you start to speed up the motion. So yeah, this is how I developed and how I think of this rotating wrist motion. And thank you for asking me questions, and feel free to comment this video with more questions. I will do this question and answer video. I will pick some questions here and there, and I will answer them in the next question and answer video.